Hello and welcome to In Service to Transformation with me, your host, Claire Darnell. This week I am joined by Kirsty Day. Now, I met Kirsty at a retreat, and I will give a little bit of context because it's kind of valuable. And Kirsty runs these incredible retreats using her experience in the field of working with women who are seeking recovery from different lifestyles, from different substances, from different behavioral patterns. And she started these retreats called Phoenix Rising. And I accidentally got myself invited to one. They happened to have a last minute spot. I rocked up thinking, I'm going on a retreat and it's about body shame. And I was really experiencing a flavour of my body shame at that time. I think this was like 6 or 7 years ago, right? It was
Right.
quite a long time ago. And I rocked up and I thought, oh yeah, great. I'm just going to like deal with this body shame thing, like really naive. And we sat down and Kirsty was like, great, welcome to the retreat. And we're going to talk about sex, body image and shame. And I thought, oh my God, what have I got myself into? And yeah, needless to say, I've gone back repeatedly to Kirsty's retreats. They are so profoundly life changing. And a large part of that is because of who Kirsty is and what she brings and what she's created for these incredible women that are sort of brave enough to embark on these journeys.
That's
So
good.
it gives me great pleasure to introduce you, Kirsty, to this audience.
Great to
Thank
be here.
you.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It's great to be here. Really is.
So I'm curious as well. One thing I didn't check really before we started recording is like, what do you do? How do you describe what you do for a start? Like, let's start there. Like, are you a drug worker? You're an addictions worker? You're a recovery. You have so many strings to your bow.
I do. There are kind of many hats, and literally panic just dropped into my heart when I thought, how do I encapsulate this in one sentence?
You don't need to do it in one sentence. There you go.
I don't think I can, to be honest with you. I mean, technically, my profession is absolutely in the field of addiction and trauma. Um, I am, part of the senior management team of a, medium-sized charity who do unbelievable, amazing work of which I was a beneficiary, nearly 20 years ago. I'm also a student. I'm at the tail end of a master's degree. Yeah, thankfully. Um, there are many hats. I'm wife, mother. There are kind of many. What do I do? What do I do? I try and leave this world a little better than I found it through a variety of mediums. If I had to sum it up in a sentence, it would probably be that.
And that's beautiful because there's so much bandwidth within that, right?
Absolutely, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And I love so the way that you found it. So that kind of takes us to the beginning of your
Mhm.
story, which is where I like to start with like how did you find the world? Like what was it that led you to understanding that you wanted to seek out some form of transformation? Where do we begin? Where does your story begin?
So we begin actually. So if we're going to create a visual, we begin in a prison cell on
Wow.
a uh, allegedly drug-free wing that wasn't very drug-free in HMP Newhall. That's where we begin. And to be honest with you, I'd love to say that, I don't know, an angel, an entity, something appeared at the foot of my bed, had a, very stern conversation with me about the path of my life, etc., etc. And some singular event occurred that set me off on a path of transformation, but that wouldn't be the truth. In reality, the day, and I know the date, right? The day that I woke up and made a decision that something drastic needed to happen, that a transformation needed to take place in my own life, it was a perfectly ordinary day. There were
Wow.
no external contributing factors like, the kind of things that can happen in the environment that I'm describing that might have added stress or pressure or birthed a desire to transform. None of those factors were present. Um,
Wow.
the only thing I can think of, if I had to, because I've reflected on this a lot over the years, why that day, why that thought, why that, um, why that set of actions after the thought. The only thing I can think of is that on a soul level, the accumulative impact of living outside of my values and potential caught up with me. That's the only thing, and that it occurred subconsciously.
Wow, I love your accumulative. Say that. Can you say that again?
I'll try.
Your
The accumulative impact of living
yeah.
outside of my values and potential finally caught up with me on a
Wow.
subconscious level. That's the only, if I had to grab at something that makes that ordinary day extraordinary, because it was an extraordinary day, just not in any external factors. And like I said, there was no eureka moment, there was no epiphany, there was no singular causal factor for that. So if it isn't singular, it must be accumulative. Is the only thing that I can kind of, it's the only satisfactory conclusion I've ever reached as to why I woke up that day, and everything that had been acceptable, satisfactory, comfortable was suddenly the exact opposite. And my life and my thinking, my circumstances, the consequences were unacceptable, unsatisfactory, and uncomfortable. And something needed to change.
So like that, it's almost how I'm visual because I'm very visual, and
Yeah,
I'm just imagining it's like this deeper, this awareness of this deeper knowing that there's something more, this a version of you,
yeah,
almost on another timeline that is doing
right,
better.
right. And maybe, I mean, you've just given me a thought about a different way to describe it. Maybe a, a veil or a wall between, that had protected me from that reality. I woke up that day and the veil was gone.
Yeah.
There was complete clarity, ultra HD, you know, that was the difference, that whatever had blinded me, soothed me, or enabled me to remain in what I would consider to have been actually quite safe, psychologically and emotionally safe realms prior to that, no longer existed. And as a result of that internal metamorphosis, I was catapulted into the need then to seek out support, because I also knew that the sum total of my resources were insufficient to bring about that, further metamorphosis that was going to be required externally. Yeah, so I went and I mean, my obvious number one problem, I mean, I had two major problems at that time. One, I was incarcerated. Two, I also had a drug problem. They
Yeah.
the sum total of two major issues in my life. I was also aware that I wasn't going to be able to do anything about my incarceration that day. That wasn't going to change. I wasn't about to be released. But I knew I could do something about problem number two.
Yes.
So I went and sought out the services within the prison system that are, uh, designed to support with substance misuse, and didn't realise I was about to be placed in a crossroads moment in my life, major one that I, I, I thank any and every thing in the world that I made the decision that I made. But they, effectively, they gave me two choices. Both required major change. One was to go to another prison that was, in the north of the country. One was to go to a different prison in the south of the country. The northern offer, I knew that the prison was saturated with the substance I was using. I hadn't heard great things. And the southern one, there was a program, a rehabilitation program that was quite intensive. You were separated from other prisoners. It was a prison within a prison, but a rehabilitation centre. And thank God I made the choice to go down south. Thank God, because if I hadn't,
Such a crossroads moment as well,
I,
because if I think, having been through active addiction myself, we're not always capable of making that choice, and it's like the perfect you know collaboration of this veil being lifted, like this I was blind and now I see,
Yep.
and then being given the choice and really choosing life,
Yeah.
right?
Absolutely.
Choosing another way,
Hmm.
choosing to
Yeah.
live.
And not really understanding the implications of the choice I was making at the time either. I was still, there were other layers to the veil I was yet to discover, right? But
As we do.
yeah, exactly. Level one was gone, and that facilitated the next choice, and then each one begets another choice down the line, which I'm sure we'll talk about probably over the
Yeah.
course of this conversation.
And it's more evidence, right? Is all we have to do is to do the next right thing. We don't have to have the whole plan.
Yeah,
We don't have to know all of the answers. But
yeah,
if we make one good
hmm
choice, it moves us in the
yeah, yeah,
right direction, inverted commas,
yeah.
on the trajectory that ultimately will serve us. Fascinating. So, unwittingly, you enter into this rehabilitation program, the prison within the prison, as you
Mhm.
say. What was it like?
So I remember walking onto the unit, and I'm not a philosopher. Let me be clear on that. Right?
I beg to differ.
Well, I walked onto the prison unit, and I just had this inherent, makes me emotional. I just had this inherent felt sense that good things happen here. That's the thought that ran through my mind. So there was a safety, which within the kind of prison estate is an unusual currency. Safety is not prevalent all the time. I walked onto this place, and I thought good things happen here. And I suppose in some ways that base belief allowed me then to, embrace what was on offer. And it was therapeutic, psychodynamic, educational. It was like a blended offer, but it allowed me to embrace it, still with all of the kind of shortcomings of someone who's lived a particular way for a long period of time, and has to almost thaw out and unfreeze and adjust attitudes and thinking and all that kind of stuff. I still had all of that. It allowed me to embrace where required in the earlier kind of parts of the rehabilitation.
Yeah. Such faith
Mm,
in that moment of good things happen here.
yeah, yeah, for sure. And then, good people facilitated good things, so there were, I always get emotional speaking about these people. Had such a profound impact on my life. There was one little old lady, and her name was Joy. And I don't know, she must have been, I feel like she must have been pushing 70. I hope that's not offensive to her, but I felt like that. But her energy was reparative, and it was warm, and it was nurturing, and it was non-threatening. And whereas I think if they'd, and she became my allocated counsellor, whereas I think if they'd have allocated me somebody else, and like there was a small fiery one, and there was such a good blend in the team that they played it right for me. They gave me the most disarming of all of the team. I'd have gone toe to toe with fire. I might have struggled with wind, but earth grounded me, and that's what she was. She was earth, and she grounded me on every level. And I went on to trust her and one other of the staff members implicitly and deeply. I found myself taking in the therapy sessions, taking some of the most wounded, broken, hurting, angry, lost, tired, little bear cub parts of me, um, almost without my permission. Or almost, it just happened. I used to come out and think, like, how did you, what witchcraft and wizardry was that? Like, how did you, I'd come out confused as to how it had occurred, but, that kind of foundation of safety and earth. And it was just everything that I needed that I never could have articulated that I needed at the time.
I love how you interwove the elemental
Hmm.
pieces into that and
Yeah.
how it made me feel like how love comes in so many different guises and meets us where we're at.
Absolutely.
And I do wonder how much planning went into pairing you with, was it Joy? You
Joy.
said her name
Yeah.
was. How appropriate, right?
Mm.
But how you were teamed with Joy, and how much of that was divine and how much of that was
Yeah.
just pragmatism in terms of who was available. And
I think divine wisdom incorporates
yeah,
pragmatism completely. And
totally.
I think they probably knew that, my trauma responses were on the fire end of the spectrum. Um, they also probably knew that I was going to need someone so non-threatening that I could be rendered defenseless by nature of the
Mm.
fact that I put my own weapons down. And I think that with the pre-information they would have had, plus their skill and expertise, plus a divine power operating, I think those three things combined, and that's why I ended up with her.
And there's nothing more disarming for fire than earth, right? If you have
So,
a raging fire, the thing
yep,
you can do is throw sand or
exactly.
dirt on it
Take
and
the
just,
oxygen out of it.
yeah, totally. Wow. So she was deoxygenating you.
Yeah,
She was quelling your
yeah, for
flame.
sure.
Your come. Those people are so magical as well that we just find ourselves opening up to, and we just feel innately safe with.
Mhm.
It's interesting that you mention that, because I would say you hold that value as well. That people just do want to open up to you, right?
Right,
They do want to share their stuff with you. So you know how people can be mirrors for us as well,
absolutely. Yeah,
for the gifts that we hold, but we don't yet see it. And
for
so
sure.
here you are coming out confused. How has she done this wizardry and dark magic? And actually, it's something. It's a code that you hold yourself.
Absolutely. If I do half the job that she did, and probably still does, I'm deeply, deeply grateful and take that as an absolute compliment.
Oh, it'd be amazing if she gets to listen to this,
Yeah,
right? And
yeah. I don't know if she's, I don't know if she's still alive because the age that she was at the time, and we're 17 years on now, so I'm not sure.
wow, yeah. Well, thank you, and gratitude to her for
Oh,
how
yeah,
she supported you through that. So
absolutely.
we're talking 17 years ago.
Hmm.
Obviously, we won't ask you to give away your age. You don't need to do that. But we're talking 17 years ago, and at this point, you're in the prison system. You're suffering with addiction. Can I delve a little bit into what had got you there? Like, what was it you started to unpack in these sessions with Joy?
So I'd, I mean, I'll give you the abbreviated version because there's a really long-winded version also, but
Yeah.
a life of trauma. I'd grown up both my parents were addicts. I'd grown up in and out of the care system with
Mm.
multiple dysfunctional relationships and a real detachment from people in particular as a safety mechanism. It was a lot safer not to trust, not to love, not to invest, not to ever grow roots or lay roots or anything like that. And then, as a almost as a coping mechanism, if you will, um, 10 years of drug addiction, crime, and all of the depravity and grime that comes with that. So that, you know, at 28, I might not give you my age now, but I'll tell you I was 28 there. So any mathematicians who want to figure out my age can do. At 28, I'm still arguably relatively young. Emotionally, I'm much younger.
Yeah.
I think there's a freeze effect that comes with emotional and development when you
Mm.
bring substances into play. So effectively, she was counselling an 18-year-old angry, broken, lost kid. Really,
Yeah. Yeah. So interesting, it, because if I think about myself, I was the little adult was there, the little professor, that parentified element of me. I
absolutely,
was so mature in so many ways,
yeah.
had so much responsibility, but at the same time, I was a child acting as if I was an adult.
Mhm.
So yeah, we are so frozen
Yeah, I think
at that.
you know
Yeah.
if you ask me to run a household, do anything logistical, try and figure out the logic behind any situation under the sun, even at that time, I'm your girl. Absolutely. You know, if you need us to find a sensible and practical way through this
Yeah.
situation, whatever it is, I'm your girl. You know, if you want me to deeply reflect on my own wounds and how they impact on my connections with others, I'm lost. I don't
Emotion. So
know.
it's
Go and
like
ask an
emotional
expert.
maturity,
Exactly. And that
modality.
was the differential. And I think that, you know, all of the, I suppose, psychological coping, if I separate emotional, psychological, if it, all of the psychological coping had absolutely kept me safe, alive, you know, all that stuff, but it also served as a barrier also because you had to get through all of the tightly wound defenses to get to the emotional, the vulnerable, and everything that kind of lay behind it. And to be honest with you, prior to Joy, nobody had in maybe ever. I think maybe she was the first person I encountered who was smart enough to come through the back door, right? Because the front door, there was, you know, there was locks, bolts, shutters, windows, CCTV, everything, and she just meandered through the back garden and let herself in.
Cooey
Pop the
gave
kettle
you a
on.
hug.
Right, exactly that. That's almost how it felt like. How are we here? How did this happen? But she, you know, she did that. She didn't take any defense on head on ever. Never did. You know, she would just
Mm.
put her weapons down and say, "We're not. I'm not your adversary. I'm not an adversary
Yeah.
here. I'm not a threat. I'm not an adversary. I'm just going to go back round the back door and let myself in."
The perfect example of kind of leading or encapsulating a situation with love.
Yeah, and that's what it was. That was the currency. It was love, and it was. I was more needing of it than I cared to admit.
Oof, I felt that one.
Yeah, far more needing of it than I. You know, there was still a little kid stuck on a windowsill somewhere, waiting for someone, anyone. You know, and they sent her. God sent her. It's perfect, just perfect. Because that's, you know, I think she made the initial headway, but then she involved me in the journey because what she didn't want was for me to get to the end of that journey, and she played an unhealthy savior role. So there
Oof.
was a shared ownership of
Yeah.
what was happening after the initial after she'd let herself in the back door the first time. Then she involved me in the process, so she was it was with me rather than to me.
Yes. So important when we're in that facilitation space, in that role of, let's call it a inverted commas healer,
Yeah,
whatever the modality is, whatever the approach is, to remind people that actually they're doing it
yeah,
themselves.
100%.
My experience is anyone who's telling you I am healing you,
Yeah,
give them a wide berth,
yeah,
because we ultimately do have all of the answers inside, but it's about being reminded
yeah,
of that inherent wisdom we carry, the
absolutely.
capability we
Yeah.
hold. I love that. So you started to co-create
Hmm.
a new reality for
Yeah,
yourself, a
basically.
new perspective, a new way of holding yourself. And what did you try? So she's a therapist, a counsellor, but ultimately,
Yeah, so
what did you start to explore?
she's an addictions therapist, which you know is a slightly more directive form of
Mm,
counselling than traditional, if you will, if that's
yeah.
the proper term. I don't mean to be offensive to anybody with that term. But addictions counselling is more directive. Um,
Mm,
it's it's more active, so there is a give and take within it. There are transactions which occur intentionally, and then you know, I mean, that was the initial modality. I've gone on to and so that was counselling within a 12-step rehabilitation facility. So that's
yeah.
where the introduction of the 12 steps came in, and that was a
Mm,
particularly militant version of it, let's say, which worked for me. I was fine, militant, you know, fire and fire. I can take that. That's fine. Um, but you know, there have been multiple modalities of therapy over the years. when I was released from prison and then went on into another rehabilitation facility to do some more work. Then then I had psychotherapy, drama therapy, and action methods, which was particularly impactful for me. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. So and then so I've probably done more modalities of therapy than I know, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
Well, good. On
Yeah.
the tail end, I've never asked what model is this
What is
right
this?
now.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah,
Who
'cause-
masterminded
yeah,
this
exactly. So some of
theory?
them
Yeah.
I probably won't even know, but some of them I've learned as I've gone on to become a practitioner myself. Then oh, that was that, that
Mm.
was that, that was that.
Yeah.
You know, yeah. So I've done multiple. Basically, I've never closed the door on any modality really that was within my comfort zone, because that was a component also.
Mm.
Drama therapy was difficult for me to get into, because one of the worst things at that time, in such early recovery, maybe a year, 2 years into this journey, one of the worst things that could have happened to me at that time would have been to look silly.
Oh, yeah.
Now, trying to do drama therapy and not look silly,
Yeah.
it's not actually. Oh, I'd have achieved it.
Part of the thing is to look silly, right? It's to drop the
Exactly that.
mask. Yeah.
Exactly that. It's to, be so present in the moment, in whatever the
Mm.
exercise is or whatever we're doing, that being silly actually isn't even in the ether,
Yeah.
because you're
There is
caught
no
in the
silly.
moment.
Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly.
You're alive. You're
Yeah.
present.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
in what is true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think for me it was a particularly impactful form of therapy, because of the with the action methods end of drama therapy. It was the enactment of the scenarios that, and
Mm.
they're obviously deeply personal to yourself or whichever person in the room is having their material kind of brought to life, and then
Yeah.
everybody else in the group is an active participant in a role or a scenario, or they're a representation of something about that situation. So we all go there, even if it's
Yeah.
not your situation. We're all on the journey. We're all representing different things and experiencing what that feels like and formulating beliefs, and so which also delves into your own stuff too. um and
Mm.
because it doesn't follow the traditional kind of therapy format, you have less ability to control or manage it or that kind of thing. You just kind of end up swept along with it, which for me, if you remember what I said about the front door and how battered up it
Mm.
was with all the, bolts, padlocks, all that stuff, that was also a backdoor kind of approach with other therapy.
Yeah.
It was really good.
Deeply immersive as well, and it really reminds me of family constellation work,
Right? Yep.
right?
Yep.
So where we're literally all gestalt, where we're just like literally just plunged into
Yeah.
a new perspective,
Yeah. For sure.
because no two people have the same. I mean, you could I don't know if you have siblings, but I know I have two siblings.
Hmm.
We were all raised in the same house,
Right.
same parent.
Yeah.
None of us are the same. None of us have had the same experience. We have some familiar experiences
Hmm.
or perspectives, but actually, ultimately, every one of us has had a completely different experience of that parent.
Right.
Everything's changing, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, another lens coming in with a comparative stranger, if you think about the other individuals in your drama therapy
Yep.
group, a whole different perspective and lens. And I think it's when we get to see things playing out visually, we do, yeah, we get the opportunity to experience things differently, to feel things differently, whether you're the actor or the
Hmm.
recipient of the scene,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. For sure. And I think that one of the consequences and superpowers that are birthed from childhood neglect
Mm.
are a deep inherent desire to honor and witness others.
Oh,
And
yes,
so,
so true.
and so, irrespective of how silly it might have felt, how awkward I might have felt being a tree or being a teddy bear or whatever it was that I was, my desire to honor and bear witness for my peers was greater, which is also reparative. every time I honor and witness for somebody else, I'm also honoring and witnessing for myself.
Yeah.
You know, so that was all in
Deeply,
there too.
yeah. And it's, I mean, being witnessed is such a gift.
Mm,
And to be the witness for others.
yeah.
Actually, you've just made me think about my daughter studying performing arts,
Ah.
and it's been deeply healing for her
Mm,
as a modality. And I remember her coming home and saying, "Oh my goodness, we're doing interpretive
right.
kind of this theatre work where we had to be a tree. Today I had to be a flower that was being fed by the sun, and one of the other guys had to be photosynthesis, and all of this kind of
Yeah.
stuff." And she hated it. Day one, she was like, "This is ridiculous. I've got to do this module for the whole month." And I think I checked in with her about a week later and I was like, "Oh, are you still hating it?" She was like, "I love it. It's been my favourite thing ever."
Yeah.
Because I think as soon as she got over that initial
Mm,
ick of, she's a teenager, right?
yeah.
She
Of
was
course.
16. It's like, of course she doesn't want to be judged. As soon as you get over that initial ick and you can immerse yourself in the what if,
Yeah.
you actually find freedom.
Yeah.
So yeah, I can really imagine that drama therapy. My last episode was with this person called Atlas Talisman, and the one that came out yesterday, and he runs an organisation, or came up with this organisation called Open World Theatre,
Mm-hmm.
and it's about turning up in your humanness with what's alive, and literally how do we just interact with other humans and just be prepared for whatever. And I think there's not enough of that in the world at the moment. We have these masks and we present
Yeah.
this version of ourselves, and it becomes the construct that we're living within. It becomes such a cage to our expression.
Absolutely.
So, how beautiful. What a way of really finding more of you and setting yourself free. I love that.
Mm.
So inspiring. And so, loads of different modalities, loads of different therapies, drama therapy, deeply impactful. What started to happen there? You're still incarcerated, right? So what happens next?
So the by the time I was doing the drama therapy, I was
You
released. So I was already out at
amazing.
that time, and I was in another rehab facility. And then the drama therapy, I suppose, was the cherry on the cake of the offer that was available to me at that time. So that was
Mm,
right at the end of the road, just as I'm about to come back into the community. And that did transcend over whilst I was still doing the drama therapy. And
yeah,
so I think what started to happen was, I suppose, if there was a transaction with the healing, there was something else was birthed. And I think, if I had to trace the desire to be in service to transformation or in service to others, I think it was birthed there. It was,
yeah.
just this deep inherent desire of, I can make linkages in my brain between stuff, and stuff being things that people have gone through, multiple different models and modalities. And obviously, at that time, the lens was firmly turned inwards. So, so what does this mean for me? And so, what does that mean in terms of what I think about this? And how do I still feel that that situation impacted me the same way? And, I started to become aware of trauma responses and how actually there are two ways to look at the blend of responses or the consequences of trauma that I had. I could view them as a backpack of crap, basically, that I was going to be burdened with carrying for the rest of my life. Or I could look at, that actually I'm pretty blessed that I have tenacity, I have integrity, I have perseverance, I have courage, I have all of these things that exist within the grey murkiness. And if I can just pull these little diamonds out and channel and utilize them for myself first and foremost as part of my healing journey. But I started to think about the potential then for others also. Um,
Yeah.
I didn't stop formulating ideas about retreats or anything like that because there was still a couple of major pieces that needed to occur within my own journey. Because one of the things that I'd learned relatively early on, and again, it's a consequence of being an inherently untrusting person of other human beings, is that I became a student of human behavior through the lens
Yeah.
of a survival, a survival lens, let's say. I became a student of human behavior. So I was, what's sometimes known as a vibes watcher. I pay attention to everything you do say, pay attention to everything you don't say. I pay attention to the nuances and the interplay between those two things and your body language and the context of the situation, and end up with this multifaceted view of every single human being, which in front of me, which is designed to keep me safe. That's what it's designed to do. It's
Yeah.
just like a level 5 threat assessment, basically, as opposed to are you going to hit me? Do I need to run level 1 threat assessment? And as a result of that, I realized that there were a lot of people out there, and I don't say this with judgment. I would have done 15 years ago, but I don't say I'm a little bit wiser, a little bit more mature now. But I realized that there were a lot of people out there channeling their wounds rather than the diamonds within their wounds to help others. And I knew
Mm.
at that time I didn't want that. I knew I didn't want to pull through the murk and end up, transferring that to somebody else, because I wasn't far enough in my own healing journey to be safe, stable, steady, consistent, skilled, and talented enough to be able to facilitate for somebody else. So, whilst the desire to kind of help others was absolutely birthed at that time, I knew that the skill and the real solid refinement of the healing for myself wasn't far enough down the journey for me to kind of do anything tangible with that.
Yeah. So, okay, so you kind of have this awareness, like I'm. This is I imagine. Well, no, I'm not even going to. Tell me what you did next. So you've kind of got this knowing. This is my pathway. I'm going to follow
Mm-hmm,
this.
mm-hmm.
And you mentioned also this was a 12-step rehabilitation process you'd been through. So have you also started to engage in 12-step recovery outside and
Yeah, yeah. So the first
ground
facility,
for
yeah,
growing these skills for us, right?
yeah, for sure. So the first facility was 12-step. The second one wasn't. It was eclectic, basically. Lots of
Mm,
different modalities thrown in together. Um,
yeah.
but yeah, I'd become part of a 12-step community. So I was, in Gloucestershire. So I was, just starting to embark on the program and the components that come with the program. I
Mm,
was also still doing this kind of other work. And what
yeah.
happened next is it was really, if I had to categorize my recovery into seasons, that was the season of building relationships. It was actually playing out the things that I'd learned in in all of the therapy, it actually into real life, with varying degrees of
Integrating the
success.
learning
Yeah,
almost.
basically, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so I've discussed this in therapy. I know that I have a major penchant for control, and then I'm going into this scenario, this committee meeting. How does that play out, right? And it was all that kind of stuff. And I was going to say I'm sure I know I irritated a lot of people at that time, because I'd also found this amazing thing that really works, and I couldn't understand why other people just wouldn't want to get it.
Everyone should do it,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. And I kind of thought that if you surgically insert it down somebody's throat, that's the best way to, not think. I took the front door approach with others, knowing that the front door approach hadn't worked with me.
Yeah.
It's all beautiful learning and messy and lots of apologies and all that stuff. But it was actually the next like major piece of healing along the way was completely unplanned. It was the healing that came from meeting my then partner, now husband. Um, and trying to connect with this other human being who fundamentally is the opposite of me on every level, in nature, humor,
Mhm.
even that we can't choose a film to watch in our house. Just can't do it. It's not possible. We cannot. There's no middle ground. I mean, it's rare that we find one. We do sometimes, but I'm just realizing that this human being had been sent to help me. There was a component of esteem that still needed to be healed, and the healing around that, it was the weirdest thing. Again, unplanned. We didn't sit down in therapy. I sat down one day. Again, no epiphany day, nothing special happening. I sat down one day and thought, Kirsty, you do realize that this man accepts all of you. good, bad, indifferent, everything in between, values you, honors you, raises you up. How dare you not do the same? And it was just this, like, oh, well, I could do that. That's this with all this other learning. Maybe I could start to live as if I am a person of worth. Which was still a kind of battle at the time. Yeah, and then he interwove um, faith. So he comes from more of a family of faith, and it's interesting because I do come from Catholic origins, but I
Right.
discarded that years and years before. But faith came into play at that point, which was not in the plan. In fact, I was vehemently anti. Um, but there was a component, a different component of healing that came from my faith journey that I'd spent a lot of years in therapy prior to that time, and it was around my wedding, and it was around roots, and it was around purity, and you know, this probably sounds like a crazy term that I'm going to use now in a very modern world, but holiness. All of these kind of crazy concepts that I had absolutely no desire whatsoever to be involved in.
Yeah.
And in some ways, I then had to figure out the interplay between and what does my faith mean with therapy, and what does my faith mean with knowledge and healing, and all of these. So it's been such a multifaceted, wonderful journey, really.
Yeah. So fascinating to me as well. I mean, faith again is something that growing up agnostic
Right?
or atheist, I think it would be more appropriate to say atheist. Mother was very much, we were all born out of an explosion. There is no God.
Yeah.
There was that kind of
Mm-hmm.
upbringing. Um, but just that deep knowing that there was more.
Yeah.
And whether that was born out of adversity and just feeling like this can't be it,
Yeah.
or whether that is just that deep knowing, because my own pathway with faith, or you call it holy, I call it divinity. I
Right.
think it's
Right.
one and the same
Right.
thing. It's
Right.
like this faith in this inherent goodness that exists in the world that wants the best for me, for you, for everybody.
Right.
And this, for me, it's been a remembrance. It's been like this remembrance, this pathway of, yeah, yeah, like there is another way. There is something more. There is something bigger.
Yeah.
It started at the beginning with like looking out at the ocean and seeing this mini tornado running across the ocean, and just thinking,
Yeah.
wow, really early recovery.
Yeah.
So nature, God putting my cigarettes out so I could no longer smoke, all of these funny,
Yeah.
crazy coincidences. And then it's obviously accumulated into something that makes sense. So, what that demonstrates to me, and what I've noticed about your story,
Yeah.
there's always been faith.
Yeah.
There's always been a faith and
Yeah.
an understanding and a sense of, yeah, there is a higher power, a bigger connection. We get to define it, right, for ourselves.
Right.
You
And I think
met your husband, and
I think it's definitely evolved over time. I think that what I didn't, I mean, this is again beauty of hindsight stuff, really. Um, when during the first, I can't name the time, but let's say 7 years of my recovery, in a lot of ways, I understood on an intellectual level that there were powers greater than me. I understood that electricity could kill me if I came into contact with it in the wrong way. I understood
yeah,
that the sea could end so that really basic concept of a power greater than me, I was on board with and I understood it.
yeah,
But when it came to my vulnerability or, being maskless, naked, and I don't even just mean physically, I mean naked on every level a person can be naked, then my concept of a power greater, the safest hands I could be in were my own, right? And so I kind of, I it wasn't even. I mean, it probably would have been less painful if I'd have gone with a concept early on around. kind of higher self, maybe just operating from those absolute best intentioned parts of myself, that would have been easier, but I didn't. Um, I just thought I'm the boss of me, and I couldn't trust anything outside of me to hold me, and I think, and that's the greatest, I suppose, That's not an oxymoron, but maybe it is an oxymoron. It's just the greatest contradiction that I would end up as a Christian. It really is, because I can place me in my hands, and I still make bad decisions, but I'll believe fundamentally, at least I made them, and there's a safety in that, to go from healing from, the hypocrisy of Catholicism in my childhood, and the hypocrisy of
Yeah.
it was my parents are smoking crack and shooting up heroin and taking every barbiturate they can get their hands on from Monday to Saturday night, and then Sunday morning we all get dressed up and we go, just the hypocrisy of it, like, and then going through, and I think this isn't exclusive to the Christian faith. This is something that we go through as people in recovery. Getting to a point where there's been enough trauma go on that we start to ask ourselves reflective questions about why me, and why did God let this happen to me? That's
Yeah.
that happens to many of us, irrespective of kind of faith, etc. If there is a God, then why, right? And I suppose I it's part of the kind of emancipation process, and I think this is where every modality collided for me. It wasn't a, well, if not you, then who? Because that wouldn't have been an acceptable answer to me. I don't care who, choose anybody else, just not me,
Just
right?
not me.
That would have been my answer. I think that where all of the roads come together, faith and the 12 steps, and the therapy and everything else that I'd ever been through, was to create you into who you are today, right? And that's the sum total of it all. And then so I had to stop and ask myself, well, okay, did I get a bum deal there? Am I okay with who I am today, and who all of this adversity, who it bred me into? And the answer was yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I am. I really, really am, because if it was all for something, right, then it was not for nothing. And I know that's a double negative, but you understand what I mean.
I
Because
totally get
because
it.
then I can channel it, then I can do something with it, then we can go somewhere with it. Then I was created for a purpose, and there is a plan and a purpose for my life, and I'm in. I'm fully signed up. Where we going? What we doing? And that's what brings me into then. That's I suppose the point I knew I was ready to give this, whatever this is, all of this stuff, to others.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, beautiful. Yeah, I really identify, and almost get into that stage of just. I had this moment where, I don't know. It was just, for me. It was like this. Oh, do you know what? Actually, I could die today, and I'd be all right. I'd be quite happy
Right.
with this lot. Like this, I would have been. This would be a life lived well.
Right.
You know.
Yeah.
Like it was after I'd been hospitalised, and I thought I was going to die
Right.
with sepsis, and yeah, I recovered, and I was just like, yeah, it's going to be okay. Like this is it. This
Yeah.
All of this has been worth it.
Yeah.
After years of
Yeah.
nah,
Yeah.
I didn't
Yeah.
deserve this,
Yeah.
or
Right.
I really, 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 really identify.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
one of the there's nothing like a near death experience to take perspective, but one of the things that, I don't know where I got this from. I don't think I created it. I think I found it somewhere else and have used it many times since. There's an exercise in what was, I suppose, the pre-version of the retreats before they became the retreats. There's called
yeah,
the falling plane letter, and effectively, you're in a session with a group of people, and it's okay. So we're on a plane, and your loved ones aren't with you, but they're okay and they're safe, and you're going to your bucket list dream destination. Think of it. You've worked really hard for a year. You've saved up. You've got good money. There's no pressures. Everything's okay at home. And then the pilot makes an announcement that, unfortunately, we've had an engine failure. The plane is going to go down. We've probably got about 20 minutes. The stewardesses are going to come and hand out a piece of pen and a paper. We want you to write some letters. We're not expected to, basically the land that we're flying over makes survival really highly unlikely. We're going to try and dump these letters off in the hope that somebody finds them and that your final words to your loved ones kind of make it. And this exercise, it's deeply, deeply emotive for people. And, it is so interesting what comes out of it because, nobody thanks their boss. Nobody ever says, thanks, boss, for being a great boss and for all the great line managements. And the career is gone for most, For most, you're not even thinking about that. It's who matters most and what do I need to say? What do I need you to understand? And then obviously there's, after the saying bits, that also shows you how much residue of regret is left. Right? Because there will be inevitably parts of those conversations where I never got to say sorry for this. I'm so, it didn't matter. I don't know why I sweated that thing every single day. And, children, I don't know why I bothered you about your trainers on the floor every single week. I wish I hadn't now. And, all of this stuff comes up. And, depending on your circumstances and your relationships, there are different degrees of it. But then inevitably at the end, people come to this kind of reflection of, okay, this all going to end in 10 minutes. Like, am I okay with what I did? Am I okay with who I became? Am I okay with what's my legacy? What have I left? What will people remember? What will people say? What did I, was I, and again, to quote, some Christian literature, what did I do to the least of his people? Did I see the invisible? Did I help the lost? Did I, all that's what you're left with. And at that point, the answer was, I'd be okay.
Yeah.
I'd be okay, which is unbelievable considering, my origin. Unbelievable.
Totally. What a powerful exercise. I'd love to do that exercise. And you have that. What an opportunity, because when you look at that regret lens, you have the opportunity because the plane isn't really going
Exactly.
down, right? You get to live.
Yeah, well, that's part
And
two
you
of the
get to,
exercise.
yeah, right? You get to, well, you're going to do differently then,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It is. It's really powerful, really powerful. And like you said, it's not over. So once your letters are written and you've wiped your tears away and you've accepted the inevitability, then the captain comes along and says, oh, it's okay. We've clicked the button and it's absolutely fine and we're going to be okay. And you're still going to your bucket list destination. It's all going to be fine. But you're left changed as a result of that, because all of the clutter and the noise of life and everything that shiny and grabs our attention, it's all gone. And it could be gone in 20 minutes. What do you need to do? It creates such an urgency and a clarity that we don't get in everyday life very often, unless people have near-death experiences or loved ones have, those are the, and it shouldn't be that way. I think, we should live a life where space is created to have that precision and clarity regularly. But, we live in a world that battles for our attention. Doesn't matter what it is, TikTok, social media, this, that, doesn't matter. As long as something has your attention other than depth, relationships and connections, then, the negative forces that drive this world are happy and content and can leave you to it.
Consumption is the order of the day, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Whew, where do we go from here? So it's what's lighting you up? Yeah. So you've gone into this kind of this mode of service, and where are you going from here? Like, how did you start to reformulate something? Because you've already said this hadn't yet become the retreat. There was this kind of nucleus of what was to become the retreat.
Yeah. I,
Yeah.
I think they were probably the less courageous version of me's trial runs, if I'm really honest with you. I still have that little voice that goes, "Who on earth is going to listen to you?" Right? This is, 7
Yeah.
years ago, before over 2,000 women showed up. So
Yeah.
I think those
Wow.
were the testers, and the way people responded to the material. I was like, it was just like a confirmation. Proceed,
Mm.
proceed. So I created a business model that didn't require. I knew I wanted to do retreats, and I knew I wanted to do material that blended different models together. I didn't just want to have to be siloed in one lane of, okay, we're doing this as CBT, or we're doing this as DBT, or we're doing this as drama therapy, or we're doing this as IFS. I knew that I wanted a blended experience.
Mm.
And if I'm really, really, really honest, I created something that I would have absolutely loved to have experienced myself,
Yeah.
right? I wanted to create a backdoor offer that
Mm.
you don't really see coming. And retreat, as you've kind of alluded to earlier, retreat is a bit of a misnomer, because of what the word conjures up. I suppose, if you are retreating, you're retreating into some of the grey spaces,
Mm.
but with a view to emerging. I think, if you're retreating anywhere, it's there to then come into freedom. And I did all the kind of technical bits, found the venue, etc., etc., and then just put it out there one day. Um, and I think we had something like, I think we planned for maybe, because my close friend at the time is also a savvy businesswoman, fierce
Mm.
feminist, absolute legend, relationships coach.
Yeah.
So already had a little bit more of the business acumen than I
Mm.
had, and also is unapologetically, fiercely herself, and was kicking my backside to just get it done, which kind
On
of
with
got me
it. Yeah.
over the line, right? And so we agreed to do it together, and I think we had something like 60 or 70 women book onto the first one, which was like, oh, okay, I suspected deeply that this was a need. Now,
Mm.
absolute confirmation that women are starving for this. And yeah, and so, and with anything, it follows a process of evolution. You know, you spoke about Gestalt earlier, and facilitating Gestalt empty chair work to 60 women. I I can't. There aren't the words. Like, this is not my life's work. This is my heart's work. This is it's beyond the calling. I think, to be really honest with you, even though it's not the predominant thing I do, this is what absolutely lights up my life.
Yeah.
And I feel like we've got this tribe of women who are going and taking kids off windowsills and out of basements and dark places and lonely places, and we're like this kick-ass tribe of, and we're kicking front doors and back doors off, and we're helping me. It's kind of like that.
Mm.
And it's an offering that I'm deeply, deeply, deeply proud of as well. Not because of me and what I bring, although I'm proud of
Mm.
that. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah. So you should be.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And even even my esteem on a bad day can't steal that, right?
Yeah.
Um, but I'm so proud of the women in the community that they've become, because I didn't plan that. That wasn't clever
No.
marketing on my part by any stretch. The women who attend the retreats, and there's usually a static and a transient component on each retreat.
Yeah.
They are their own community, and have
Mm.
become their own tribe. So sometimes I'm not there kicking the doors off. I don't need to be. They're
Nice.
off doing it themselves, which is just amazing. It's gone beyond anything I ever thought it would. And even though it's a lot smaller now, I had to realize that as I'm getting older, and I embarked on a master's degree and things like that,
Mm.
I had to override the desire I could just do it all day, every day. that I could with
Yeah.
ease, no problem. I'd love to do that, but I also had to really, you know, just really focus on trying to achieve greater balance in my life as well.
Mm.
Because every hour that I'm off, and this was a sad realization for me. You know, every hour I'm off trying to help some other adult, you know, child who's in an adult's body was an
Mm.
hour that my own child didn't have me here. You know, and in the early years, I was so swept away by the wonder and the beauty and the fierceness of it all that I missed that. And, you know, so I had to kind of bring that balance in. So now I only run two, we've just done, well, we'll be doing three this year,
Mm.
um, only two next year, and that's it. Whereas I think we were doing five a year at one point with 60 women, and well,
I
it was
think you
crazy
were.
in
And
the early years.
online, right? You were doing in person,
Yeah,
online.
yeah, all kinds, you know. And now
Yeah.
it's reached a nice steady, you know, April, September, April, September, April, September. It's reached a nice flow, um,
Mm.
which is far better for my life and for my family, you know, for my career, my education. It now has a beautiful seat of its own rather than taking the number one seat, which it did. Um, you know, because who wouldn't love that? And it
Mm.
can't come at the expense of
Yeah.
the other valuable, deeply valuable things in my life.
Mm. Yeah, I really feel you there. Like, and my experience as well with facilitation is like when it's almost like a calling, right? It's an invitation. This is your mission. Do you accept it? And
Yep.
obviously, I'm a hollow bone, of course. I'm channeling you, whatever you want me to do, divinity. And then you do the thing, and it is literally like a tap is running
Yeah.
through.
Yeah.
And it's almost addictive. Like, we do come from a background of
For sure.
addiction as well, right? So it can be quite addictive. And yes, I think sometimes there's ego in there, but actually, I think there's a huge amount of benevolence that
Yeah.
comes through where you're just like, wow, this is the
Hmm.
medicine, this is the medicine, and we're learning and we're reciprocating, and there's co creation, and
Right.
it's beautiful.
Yeah.
And then there's whew, it's a lot to
Yeah.
hold
Yeah.
that space the whole time, and that I haven't held any space in on the scale that you have, having participated in your events that were 60 strong, and then more recently, like a week or so ago, the event that was 25.
Hmm.
Very different experiences. And may I offer some reflections?
Absolutely.
The space with 60, I had some of the most profound moments in those spaces, not always in the way that I would have anticipated or prescribed they were going to come to me, like real me too moments, real moments in the small group, because you've got a room of 60 women popping off here, there, and everywhere, like in their processes. And then we had the safety of the small group, which was just really so important that you created that, smaller nucleus of care and wraparound. And, there were definitely moments in there where I was able to access pieces that I just didn't even know existed prior to arrival in those spaces. And there were definitely retreats that I was on where I was just in like pure judgment, dislike, resistance. And even they were so valuable. For me, some of the exercises I still use today, like I've started, I share them with the women that I'm coaching, and I'm like, oh, Kirsty taught me this. And there's definitely been for me medicine in the resistance, medicine in the not enjoying it, medicine in the choosing to stay. Um, there was one retreat, and I was out with my sister, and what was fascinating to me was I was seeing this, maybe even unbeknownst to my sister, but I was feeling this dynamic playing out of rejection.
Right.
Rejection of her, seeing her in her individuality, having been such a big part of her life and part of her process of moving into recovery. I was feeling this deep wounding and rejection, and it was playing out really quite toxically for me.
Yeah.
I was very angry and resentful towards her, and then bang, right at the end, there was this gift of, and I think we had a fire ceremony.
I
And
know
we
exactly
went
the retreat
into
you're talking about. I
oh, it
remember.
makes me feel like I want to cry because she gave me so much space, and then at the end she said, "It's okay. You don't have to be responsible for me anymore." And she set me free. There was this moment where I didn't understand the subcontext that was running the whole weekend through was for me to see myself, my desperate need to be needed,
Yeah.
my desperate how I took so much value from that role of caregiver
Yeah, for sure.
and saviour. And actually, the biggest gift she gave me that weekend was to say, "You're off the hook now, babe. Look at me. I'm standing on my own 2 feet.
Right.
I've got this." And it was a real, yeah, a real, it was a crossroads moment in my life. And, that wasn't what I'd gone to the retreat for, but that's
Exactly.
what I was able to take away, right? It's
Yeah.
crazy. And one of my closest friends I've met through being in the small groups with,
Yeah.
and wouldn't have met them without you. So yeah, there are so many beautiful pieces that
Yeah.
we're able to take from them.
And that's, there's so much of it that's not designed. There's,
Yeah.
for me, one of the, I suppose it's a challenge, I think, actually, that plays out live across the course of the retreat is that as much as I can theme it and plan it to within an inch of its life, there is the most beautiful elements of it are organic. And we
Yeah.
go, I've just got to be ready to go with, basically, wherever we're going to. Um, and I suppose that's the challenge for me is knowing what's helpful, what's harmful for a person to
Mm.
just allow something to be or support somebody to contain it because it may go somewhere that's not safe. But um, the times where it's okay, this is where let's go, let's see, and it wasn't planned and it's spontaneous or it's a consequence of a different workshop or something. Really beautiful things that are designed exactly for that individual, right there and then in that moment occur that they're like I said, it's organic. It's not planned by me anyway. Which is wonderful. But I think the difference in the retreats is also I think it's they are an extension of me in that sense. So the chaotic, energetic, yeah, let's do this. All that kind of fire and amazingness in the early years, and then just kind of I think just a deeper maturity coming into my own life
Yeah.
and realizing that no, we can still do this, and we can do it on a smaller scale, and we can do it in a different way because I Phoenix 2.0, which is what Phoenix was rebirthed at, because I took a year out because I got to a point where there was a retreat, probably maybe 3 years ago or something like that. Maybe not even. I can't remember anyway. Some point in the last few years, I got to the point where I thought about the next one, and instead of like, oh, which is always what happens to me, I was like, oh, and I knew it was time for a break. And I think it ended up being about 8 months that I started. I think I threatened to do it for a year, but I didn't last that long. Something like the fire started burning again. But I rebirthed it differently as Phoenix 2.0, whereas previously it was always known as Phoenix Rising Retreats. Um, Phoenix 2.0 became much less about trauma, even though it will always have that kind of vein. Um, Also because it met with the growth journeys of the participants. So there was
Yeah.
just this whole sense at the same time as I got kind of tired, um, where it was like, no, women have been on this journey for 4 years at this point, and
Mm.
actually to keep revisiting in a different form is
Yeah.
actually not helpful. Actually, it just reached that kind of natural
It allows
point.
for evolution. Yeah.
Exactly. It wasn't designed. It wasn't, again, not clever marketing or branding by me. It's just, it's listen because Phoenix is my heart. I'm able to listen
Yeah.
to the entity, I suppose, that is Phoenix and what it needs and where it's at. And I stay deeply attuned to that.
Mm.
And that's why, we are where we are now. 2 a year. We're in a different venue. We're in Somerset.
Mm.
we're focusing this season, this year so far, for whatever reason, has been around. I mean, the last retreat we were looking at survival-based behavior and the core beliefs
Yeah.
they're driven by, and when do we get a chance in life to just stop and assess, like, how are my adaptations to my earlier experiences playing out for good and for not so good in my life now, and am I okay with that? And if not, what do I want to do about it? And so that seems to be the vein that we're on
Yeah.
this year for whatever reason, and that's the beauty of it. It changes. There is
Yeah.
no prescription, and in each retreat, I spend a lot of time in prayer ahead of the retreat. What now? And then I'll see something, read something, come across something, and I'll be like, oh, okay, it's that. Okay, cool, right. And then off I
Yeah.
go and, prepare.
Love it. Yeah, the smaller retreat as well that I just attended, loving the elements of play that we're invited in, the somatic, the ice bath,
Right.
the silent disco element,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely beautiful to allow the inner child to come in, to allow, that embodiment piece. Obviously, it's really important to me, but
Yeah.
like really feeling embodied and pushing through that personal barrier that I had around. I was in nervous system shutdown at the time,
Yeah, of course.
but ultimately noticing, like allowing the facilitator, Bonnie,
Yeah.
to show me actually, no, this could be quite
Yeah.
expansive. And it definitely was. And lots of work occurred after I got home,
Amazing.
which I obviously haven't told you about.
Great.
But yeah, it's been exactly what I needed. So
Wonderful.
yeah. So let's talk a little bit about, in terms of current offerings. I know you have a retreat in November, but it's already sold
It
out,
is.
right?
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
So that's it for this year. But then next year you'll be hosting more small retreats. Is
Yeah.
that the plan? Or
Yeah.
have you not decided yet? Yeah.
So I've just finalised actually the bookings with the venue. So there'll be a
Right.
retreat early April and early September. I'm not giving the specific dates on the podcast because I I try and honour the attendance of those who kind of come, and that doesn't mean new people can't come, because as I said, there's always a I mean, we had 6 new people last time, which is awesome. But I tend to do it, through the Phoenix 2.0 Retreats Facebook page. So if anybody's
Right.
interested in,
Yeah, we can link that.
oh, perfect, yeah, amazing.
Yeah.
So if people want to find out, they'll probably be released later in the year, the actual dates and details, etc. Because what I found I can do is I'll finish one and get straight into the others and next year, and I don't actually rest in between. So
Yeah.
yeah, so I'm going on holiday. I'm going abroad in September. I've got a nice breakaway. And then when I come back, I will start looking at November and next year.
Beautiful, beautiful. So I'll definitely, for those who are interested in Kirsty's retreats, I'll share a link in the bio and on the Instagram page to the Facebook
Yeah.
hub for Phoenix 2.0.
Yeah.
I think I overheard you at the retreat, so this is a bit sneaky, but you don't offer one-to-one work, is that correct?
No, yeah. I mean, people have asked me a lot, but again, on that kind of weights and balances, there's a part of me that obviously I was a practitioner for years, so I deeply love the one-to-one journey. But when I weight that against my marriage, my career, and everything else, I couldn't earn enough to cover the value lost. That's where I kind of came to with it. There's no figure that would be acceptable for what I'm actually sacrificing. So no, I don't. I'm a qualified solution therapy coach, narrative therapy coach as well. That was a recent one that I got, so I could facilitate a particular piece on a retreat. I just needed to, but I don't do any one-to-one. And to be fair, that's quite a saturated space. There are lots of
It is.
absolutely kick-ass coaches out there, and
Yeah.
not quite as many retreats. There's some amazing women's retreats out there as well. And I just thought, actually, I'd rather operate in the less saturated space than in that kind of really busy space.
And a little note on, I guess, what sets your retreat spaces apart. I mean, I would, if you're okay for me to speak on this, I would say they're incredibly diverse
Yeah,
in terms of the audience attendance. So I think when we hear the word retreat, it can, at least in the space that I operate within, it can conjure up a certain type of
absolutely.
individual that would attend these events. And there are definitely, those women are in attendance at these retreats, as are many other women who I believe might not usually have felt that these spaces are open or accessible to them.
Yeah, yeah.
What else would you say about your retreats you think that sets them apart?
So I think that I try and I try and make, diversity of accessibility is really, really important to me.
Mm,
So, I try not to worry so much about the things that I think that usual retreat facilitators probably really bother about, which is, the acreage on the estate, the how many posters the bed has, and that kind of thing, which is
yeah,
fine if that's what you're going for. I would rather and have always maintained that, if you have a comfortable kind of place to sleep, the most important room in the whole of that place is not the bedroom. It's actually the
yeah,
large group space where we're together. It's the
mm,
space where the work is done. And the other stuff, it matters. It helps if you've got a swimming pool. It helps if you've got some acreage. But I'm not going to die without it, because it's, as I said, it's not a retreat in the traditional sense. Um,
yeah,
but they are incredibly welcoming spaces.
mm,
That all my retreats are for survivors of adversity. Full stop. That's the only entry requirement. If you've survived
mm,
adversity, okay, then you're more than welcome. Outside of that, so the greater the blend, the
yeah,
greater the range of experience, adds something, I think, to the retreat. That
mm,
you might have somebody who's, not worked in 10 years, and a CEO sat in the same room having wonderful shared experiences, and everything else is secondary, because it's
totally.
it's who I am, not what I do. And so there's
Yes,
there's an equalizer within that. All of the, labels of life, that you don't need them in the room at all, actually. Um so yeah, and the like I said, one of the things I'm most proudest of is some people, when they think women's retreat, think, oh, I hate women are quite, depending on the experiences that they've had
yeah,
with women across the course of their life, that can be
yeah,
pretty terrifying. And the bonus of having some really dedicated, absolute superstars who have continued to book onto Phoenix Rising is they understand that we have a shared responsibility to make
mm,
sure it's like no man left behind type thing, where anyone
mm,
who's new, within a few hours of arriving, especially if they've travelled alone, very nervous, who am I going to be sharing with? Is anybody going to talk to me? Am I going to be the same as all of this clutter that comes up in our heads in a new environment, gone within 2 to 3 hours. You're
yeah,
welcome, and they're seen, and visible and included and reached out to, and people notice. If you go to the toilet for too long at a retreat, someone will notice and might come over and
yeah,
say, "Is such body okay?" We
mm,
see each other, which is just amazing.
yeah. Real sisterhood, actually.
Yeah,
I've noticed.
yeah.
It's been really beautiful.
Mm.
Yeah. Amazing. So I always end up with a couple of questions,
Mhm.
right? So your, I guess your first question, and it would be around individuals who are seeking out transformation, individuals who are thinking that there has to be a different way. Would you have any pearls of wisdom, suggestions, nuggets for them in terms of embarking upon or, yeah, choosing that journey for themselves?
Yeah. So I think, what I can say is I've heard so many people um, rob themselves of the opportunity for growth. It's almost like that Brené Brown quote
Mm,
around, it's not the critic who counts, it's the one who's in the arena getting the bloody face and the busted lip and the cracked eye socket. Um, what I would say, and how that links, is get into the arena, right? Because most people are convinced, not most people, some people are convinced that they don't possess the courage, the tenacity, or the perseverance. And the truth is, That's a lie. It's a lie, because if you already survived an adverse experience, the courage is in you, the perseverance is in you, and the tenacity is in you. Otherwise, you couldn't have survived it. If there's
Yeah.
any gift, and I say this in inverted commas, that comes from adversity, it's those inherent qualities. So take them with you on a journey of transformation. Don't be convinced you don't have them because you're not super willing, or that kind of
Mm.
thing. So that would be the first thing I would say. The second thing I would say is, like, really do your research about a modality that's going to work for you. If that's coaching, amazing. If that's retreats, amazing. If that's psychotherapy, amazing. If that's drama therapy, amazing. If that's faith, 12 steps, whatever it is, really do your research. It's crazy that we can do more research on Uber Eats about what pizza we're going to order than on what life transformation path we're going to take. We kind of flick through the yellow pages and go, they're a counsellor, I need counselling, boom, amazing. But we put more depth into what pizza we're going to order on Uber
Mm.
Eats. So really do your homework and see what chimes with you. See what really chimes with you. And then, the last thing I would say is is just start. Don't
Yeah.
presume you need to know anything other. Schedule a discovery call, or schedule a most kind of retreat facilitators, therapists, or if it's a meeting, just go or ring the helpline. There's always usually a first line that's light
Mm.
touch. Engage with that. So if that's an introductory call, or discovery call, as they sometimes call it, or if reach out to the retreat facilitator, call the 12-step helpline, or maybe go on an alpha course. There's a first line that's lighter touch than the
Mm.
actual work itself. That's where there's a beautiful journey of discovery. Go on the discovery journey just on the first line, and see what chimes and fits. And when you find something, then just start it. Don't question it. Don't, just go. That
Yeah.
that would be my advice to anyone.
And it brings us back to what we discussed right at the beginning, right? About not needing to have the whole plan, but just doing the next
Yeah,
thing and allowing it to present itself
exactly
to
that.
you. Stay curious almost, yeah.
Yeah.
And then for those who want to move into facilitation, into holding space for others, who want to use that medicine of adversity to become medicine for others, what's your suggestion for them?
So, one of the things I say very often to, colleagues, people I manage, others interested in this sector, or this type of work, is remember you can only meet others as deeply as you have met yourself, right? And it, is something I absolutely live by. And that doesn't mean, I'm not saying that lived experience has greater value than learned experience. I'm not saying that.
No.
But what I'm saying is, if you have learned experience that you don't apply, and lived experience that you haven't channeled, you actually can become a weapon of mass destruction, right? Which is usually nobody's intention. So remember, first and foremost, that, actually having that kind of personal frame of reference, even if you don't disclose, that's fine. I don't always disclose on retreat. Sometimes I do if it's helpful,
Mm.
but it's not, a series of the tale of woe of Kirsty Day. Um, but it is so helpful that if somebody asks me a question, I have a personal frame of reference, then I have an
Yeah.
educational frame of reference, and I have a professional frame of reference. So I've got lots of different options on the way that I answer a question, so that it
Mm.
fits best for the individual. If you've never touched it, and you don't understand it, and you don't apply it yourself, you can get caught out. And if you plan to work with trauma survivors,
Mm-hmm.
if there's a discrepancy between your words and your embodiment of those words, and that's not to say, I'm the perfect, I'm not saying
No.
that, but if there's a major discrepancy, they'll spot it and lose trust, which kind of deads
Mm.
off the hope of doing anything effective. The other thing I would say is give within safe limits, like understand what safe limits are. I've seen well-meaning practitioners end up operating outside of their skill, and talent.
Yeah.
Um, you know, for beautiful motive. You know, I've seen people try and facilitate inner child work that they're not qualified
Mm.
to. And again, the motive is beautiful. I just want to help this person and blah, blah, blah. But it's not, can you facilitate the work? It's, can you hold the space when you're in there? And can you support the person to return to equilibrium afterwards? That's the bit
Yes.
that people don't always think about. You know, let's go there. And then, oh my gosh, we're both stuck here. I don't know how to get us out of here.
Yeah.
Right? And that's, that's damaging. So give within safe limits, your own,
I was
uh,
going to say it's
and
also about
theirs.
your own limits, right?
Yeah, for sure, your own and theirs. And then, only operate in zones of safety, yours and theirs.
Mm.
And understand what that is and what that means first and foremost. And that all sounds very, all the cautious side to it. There's another part of it that's like, if you really want to help people, just start. Don't, I didn't have, did I have any evidence whatsoever? I had bits and bobs of evidence from stuff I'd done before, and I did the light touch stuff first, but I didn't really know if it was going to work, if anyone was going to listen, if anybody was going to show up. I had to, in order for, my concept of faith to occur. Faith is not what happens when I'm stood on the edge of the cliff figuring out how much it's going to hurt my head when I land. Faith is the bit that comes when I step off. So,
Yeah.
for me, my encouragement would be, figure out those things first, but then step off, because the worst that can actually happen, outside of anything I've said about potentially harming somebody,
Mm.
is that it doesn't work. And then it might be that that was learning. So, Phoenix has been in a constant state of refinement.
Mm.
Something small or large has changed after every single retreat. So this kind of work is consistently evolving anyway. Um, so be prepared to take a learning curve, but try. If you put out a little call to the world that is like, I want to help, the world will answer and say, sounds good, we need it. That absolutely will happen. My pleasure. Mm, absolutely. No worries. Honestly, my pleasure. Did it? I saw something happen on the screen when I raised I don't know what I was talking about, but I raised my hand up and then the screen flashed. Weird. Yeah, I saw that. Yeah. All right, lovely. I was really enjoyable as well. Thank you. Do you know what I mean? Always, I always think I'm like, how's this gonna go? Do you know what I mean? But yeah, so that was beautifully facilitated. Thank you. It felt very conversational, but what you also did was give enough space for me to think, okay, I'm gonna wrap this here and let her. It's her podcast. Let her say something because I'll just keep talking because I know the segments you're gonna go through. Yeah, stunning, stunning. Yeah, 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 yeah. No worries. All right, lovely. Have a great rest of your day. I am. Oh, have you gone?